I'm writing this story to let you all know that the paranormal is a very scary and real thing. Although it draws considerable skepticism, and I must admit, sometimes it does seem a bit far-fetched, you can't dismiss the millions of eyewitness accounts from people all over the world who've experienced something supernatural. My story is a little short, but it's further evidence, at least to me, that ghosts in fact are real and authentic. I was living with my wife in a house that we recently purchased. It was an old home from the Victorian era, and we lived in the countryside. The house was spacious and incredibly massive, and had one of the biggest basements I'd ever seen in my life. But this house also had a dark side to it. When the lights went out, disturbing sounds of footsteps and voices could be heard all around. Faint echoes, nothing too loud, and every now and again, you'd hear and see doors slowly open and close. There was a moment when my wife was in the shower. Nobody was home but her, and she thought I'd come in to greet her. She heard the door slowly opening and called out my name. She moved the shower curtain to see who it was, but nobody was there. The only thing she had witnessed was the door slowly move open, and in the moment, she thought she saw a dark cloud move across the door. Creepy thing is, the door was locked. When I finally came home, she told me to stop playing games and that she knew I was messing with her. I insisted I wasn't messing with her at all. Another day she was in the shower. The door opened once again, and someone shut off the lights. She screamed and raced to turn them back on, and could have sworn she heard a heavy breathing from the moment the lights were shut off to when she turned them back on. We had this old piano in the living room. My wife loves to play, and many years before we married, I'd gotten her this beautiful antique piano. We had been sleeping one night in bed when we were woken by the sounds of the piano notes being played menacingly. When I say play, I mean that the piano sounded as if it was being sat on again and again. Like if someone got up, sat down on the piano, got up again, and sat down. The sound of multiple notes were being pushed down at the same time. It wasn't pleasant. I went downstairs to check it out, and I saw nothing. I waited to see if it would happen again, in front of my face, and I said to myself, bullcrap, just our minds messing with us. Until I saw one note being pushed down, by itself. The scariest moment happened when I again heard noises coming from the basement, although this time, it wasn't the sound of footsteps, but mumbling and gargling noises. I mean, it truly sounded as if someone was gargling water. In fact, it sounded like a mix of mumbling drunk talk and this gargling. You couldn't identify what was being said. Although I was terrified, I went down to investigate. Walking down the stairs, I see the outline of a dark shadow slowly move from one side of the basement into the other, only to vanish entirely. Even though it bothered me a great deal, I just went back to bed right after and had a strange dream. I was in that same house, and nearly the same scenario that happens in real life played out in my dream. I go down to the basement, only this time I see 3 clowns all drinking together in a circle and muttering obscenities and whispers. I yelled to get out of my house. They all turned to me with the most sinister grin and just pointed at me. One of the clowns spoke, and then I heard it say, "He needs to be sacrificed." That's when I woke up petrified. The creepiest part of this dream was that we found out that years ago, There was a man who used to live in this house, and guess what? He used to work as a clown in the circus. He was a loner who lived completely isolated as an alcoholic. One day, he had enough of his life and went into the basement, where he was never heard from again. He ended up living his entire life in misery, alone and deserted. He was found by the police after a neighbor was concerned about a rotting smell. Right next to our house was actually a graveyard. We eventually moved from out of the house that I was talking about and into another one in downtown Portland, Oregon. My wife waited until we moved to tell me one last story she'd been saving, as to not upset me further. On more than one night, she had seen an old man visit the graveyard next door. He wore an old leather hat and had an old clothes similar to those worn in the pioneering days. He carried an old leather pouch and would just stand there in the graveyard staring at our house. When we would leave, he would walk down the middle of the street. My wife got in the car to follow him, but around the corner, he vanished. He always came, but you never saw him coming. He was always just there. After a while, she stopped looking, afraid of his blank stare. It took us a while to realize, but we suspect that the man in the grave was the clown visiting his own grave. I think he regrets what he did to himself and wishes he could go back. When I was a young man in my early 20s, I used to work at a hotel that had a grisly past. I always worked a night shift, and I was no stranger to the unusual sounds and disturbances at night. This hotel was built in the early 1930s, and people often reported seeing an older couple in Victorian-era clothing walking down the hallway on the 5th floor before ultimately disappearing. Long ago, a woman was drowned to death by her own husband after he caught her cheating on him with another man in the hotel. He ended up knocking her out while she was sleeping, filled the bathtub up with water, and suffocated her under the water. He then fell to his death by jumping out of the window. This was in room 455. There were times where I had to go by myself to get the room prepared for guests the night before, and I swear, I'd hear two people whispering every time I'd walk into the room. I even heard my name being called once before, and it sent shivers up my spine. I can remember an incident where I went up to the 5th floor. The door was opened, but nobody was in there. Scared but curious, I walked into the room and noticed that the bathroom light was on and the bathtub was running. I shut off the water and the lights go out by themselves, and I heard the door slam shut. I hear the sound of glass breaking. My heart starts racing, and I instinctively scream. I turn on the light, walk out of the bathroom, and I kid you not, there was a face print on the window in the hotel room for what seemed like 30 seconds, and it just slowly disappeared. I couldn't make out anything specific, whether it looked male or female, but it was definitely a face. I had a coworker once tell me that she went into that same room, and she swears to this day that she thought she saw a woman laying in the bathtub. As she got closer and walked up to the bathroom, nothing was there, but again, the light was on when nobody had been there at all. There is also something really creepy about the hotel elevator. People report seeing an old elevator operator just waiting for you to get in before disappearing completely. Usually, you would see the elevator open by itself, and the man would be staring from afar, and as you get closer, he fades away. I remember going in the elevator many times, and I'd feel like there was a presence right behind me. In the summertime, it always felt so cold in that elevator, and I feel like I've seen a face in the reflection of that elevator mirror. In the basement of the hotel, there is a storage room that once used to be a bar many years ago. Whenever anybody worked, they were always reluctant to head down to the basement because it always made you feel uneasy. People have reported chatter in the basement when completely alone, and at times heard glass shatter. Another employee claimed to have witnessed a dark cloud just standing in the corner of the basement. Anywho, I hope you enjoyed this short story about these hotel incidences. I'm really happy that I don't work the night shift anymore, because it's incredibly creepy. Yorktown, Colonial Parkway, Yorktown, Virginia, 1970. It's been years. I don't believe in an afterlife, but the shared experiences of a detailed commisteria leaves us talking even today. The three people today continue to describe the uniforms, the hollow sunken faces, the slumped shoulders, and the look of complete and total submission in an eternity of dread that wrapped around each soldier. We were lost on the parkway in that very small town, around the battlefield. I hadn't had my driver's license that long, which created anxiety. The two people with me were concerned about the lack of turning room on the second well-maintained road, and the fog kept getting heavier and heavier. The headlights picked up soldier after soldier, walking towards us on either side of the road, not even looking at us, but straight ahead, with such exhaustion. I mentioned their gray uniforms. The uniforms were not well kept, and that struck me as being unusual. I've been around the military all my life. These were not current issue uniforms. It never occurred to us that these men fit the description of ghosts, except for their facial expressions. We all agreed that when I got the car turned around without getting stuck somehow, maybe we should give these guys a lift. I found that place to turn around, and the headlights abruptly focused on a man dressed in a gray uniform with a yellow sash. And why I think this must be a shared hysteria, a tri-corner hat. We all remarked that the uniform must have been a strange mixture of colonial and Civil War staging. But the night was so cold, and why would so many men go to so much trouble for a part of the parkway that wasn't even being traveled that night? The three of us tried to figure out who started the conversation of ghosts. We didn't discuss ghosts because at that time we didn't believe in them, but somehow we were able to share a feeling that we, or one of us, transferred into a very large, very real, shared mirage of dynamic proportion. And that's what haunts us today. What is in the human mind that could project such images to other people? How could we have seen, simultaneously, in such detail, these soldiers who looked so dead? Maybe that was the key word for our hysteria. We tested each other. What did the soldier and the turnaround look like? I knew. I only had to hear it from the other two. And so, if this was a prank, congratulations, guys. You've held our interest for years. But was it really worth the expense and makeup for one lost car in an empty, two-lane foggy parkway? My husband has been cleaning this church for 3 years, and he, as well as the rest of our family, has experienced some very strange things. So has at least one other member of the church. First, it was just a feeling of a presence that you just couldn't shake, a glimpse of a shadow from the corner of your eye, and the occasional sound that could not be explained. My husband worked his regular job from 4 p.m. to 1:30 a.m. and would go to the church after leaving his job and that was when he would experience most of the things. Then, it didn't seem to matter what time of day it was, and it even started happening when the kids would be there helping. Our two boys are now 9 and 12, and we never said anything to them for fear of scaring them. They were in the upstairs room where my husband was cleaning, and suddenly, the piano started playing one note over and over for a minute or so, and then it stopped. The boys were very frightened, but also very intrigued by the whole thing. I've been a victim of Henry, as we affectionately call him now. I've heard many things, little bumps and unexplainable noises. Our 19-year-old son took over the cleaning job for about 6 months this past summer, and he's also heard many things. Things like footsteps in front of him, doors on other floors slamming, and other little things like that. He also went to clean in the middle of the night, mainly because it is easier to do when no one is there to get in the way, or so he thought. When my husband took the job back over, it wasn't very long before he would start experiencing Henry again. Oh, did I mention that he would always seem to find dimes lying in the oddest places, sometimes as many as $2 worth in a few hours of cleaning, never finding them in places where people would frequent in the building. We never felt we needed to fear Henry, since his presence never seemed to be a threatening experience. But there was a woman who has been a long-time member of the church. She was there one day by herself doing the books, when she had heard moaning to the point of causing her to call the police, because she really felt that someone was there. My husband had arrived while the police were in the building. They had asked the woman to wait outside in case they found someone, but needless to say, that no one was there to be found. They kinda humored the woman, but my husband told her of his experiences, and she said that this wasn't the first time that things have happened to her there either. The most disturbing thing was when he was in the boiler room, cleaning some mops before he left, and me and my two sons were outside warming the car, and suddenly, he came running to the car with a horrified look on his face, and shaking tremendously. I could tell something was terribly wrong, but he didn't want to frighten the boys, so he waited to tell me after we were able to be alone. He had revealed to me that he actually saw two men walking down the stairs in the back of the boiler room, talking to each other as if he wasn't there at all. They were dressed in the style of the 20s and seemed to be almost floating down the steps. There isn't any way to enter the room from that door, since it is locked very securely. We have had many of the people we have told these things to try to explain them away, but there is no human explanation for these things. There's been times when we went there and left only after a few minutes because there is a sense of something just not being right. I come from a family that my mother and sister always had experiences. I also had times where I know the other side is present in my life. My 4-year-old nephew had come with us one day, and the children were all playing in the preschool room for about an hour. The next time we took our nephew, which was only the second time he'd ever been there with us, they were in the gym playing. He came out in the hall and asked me where the big fella was at. I was shocked that he would say that, since the only people there on both trips he made with us was us. I didn't want to frighten him, so I just asked about the big fella, and to which he responded, "You know, the big fella that was here the last time we were playing." Well, I feel that this is really all that needs to be said to explain just who or what is there in this church. A child that doesn't know what we have all experienced can hardly imagine the same thing if it isn't so. Right before the Christmas of 1999, I had what I can only call a weird experience. I'm a firm believer in ghosts and the supernatural, and have been told I am psychic, as well as experience unusual things. However, I'd never seen anything until that night. For whatever reason, I woke up around 3 a.m. to see a man in my bedroom doorway. I live alone, and my 2 cats were asleep on my bed. My first thought was an intruder, and I remember quickly screaming and reaching with one hand for my phone, and the other for the reading lamp on my bed's headboard. The man was rather large and was wearing jeans and a green plaid shirt. Just as quickly as I saw him, he turned around and silently walked out of my room. After a minute, I got out of my bed with my phone and walked around my apartment. No one was there, and there were no unlocked doors or windows. What is so unusual is, if it was a true stranger, my cats would have darted under my bed because they are not used to strange men. Maybe it was a dream, but I doubt it. This was too real and scary. Hey, you. Yeah, you. The person listening to this video. If you don't take a moment to actually make a comment and like the video and share it wherever it needs to be shared, then, well, I guess that's your choice. But think about this. Do you really want to live your life without liking a Phantom video or without making any comment of any sort? Not even about the outro, which is outrageously interesting? I don't know. I think you should, because I think that's really important. But I don't want to force you to do what you don't want to do. I don't want to be a controlling person, so you do whatever you want to do. But I highly suggest that you comment, like, share, and subscribe, because it's the only way I'll shut up and not speak about it anymore. Well, actually, I probably need to. Oh, by the way, I have some shirts available. If you want any new shirts or any new merch from Phantom, get it in the Teespring store. I'm not actually promoting it, I'm just telling you about it. Wink wink, so it's not like you have to get it, either. Hey, okay, I have no idea why I'm acting like this, but I do love you. Just remember, if you leave, please come back and watch another video. I have tons of them. Okay, I gotta go, bye.